This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Greetings, everyone, again. This is Joyce Davis, PennLive's Outreach and Opinion Editor, and this is Battleground PA. We are in for another, I think, quite interesting discussion with someone we haven't heard from in a long time, Representative Jordan Harris. But before I give him his due and give you a little bit about his illustrious background and qualifications, I'm going to welcome Jeffrey Lord on behalf of the Republicans. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Welcome. Good to be here.
I thought you were speechless there for a minute. We don't want any absences. Okay.
My mother said that's never happened in my entire life.
Exactly. And Rogette Harris, it's good to have you here hailing for the Democrats. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I was about to say, Jeffrey, you're never lost for words, so that would have been a first.
I think it started the moment I was out of the womb.
All right, guys, you've already added, but let me do this. Let me tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about Representative Jordan Harris. He was first elected in 2012 to represent the 186th legislative district, and which of course comprises communities in South and Southwest Philadelphia. He's really been a leader who's been focused a lot on the criminal justice system, but he also is the first African American to serve as both whip and appropriations chair, and the second African American to in either position. He has also served as chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus. He's a lifelong resident of South Philadelphia, but he's here actually to talk not only about Philadelphia and even not only about Pennsylvania, but we're going to talk about the whole universe if we have to. But Representative Harris, welcome. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here with you.
Okay, so there's a lot breaking, including all this news about Biden. But the first thing I just want to ask Representative Harris before we start cutting him off is, what do you see right now as the top issues from where you sit as we head into our election season leading up to November?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that Americans across this country are concerned about. I think one thing is a woman's right to choose, which consistently and constantly listed as one of the top issues that are driving people to the polls this November. The next president of the United States will have an opportunity possibly to appoint folks not only to the Supreme Court, but to our lower federal court. Before the Trump administration, we had a woman's right to choose. And after, we did not. It's one of the first times we've seen rights actually being taken away from folks. So it's extremely important to lots of folks that we show up on election day because the court is at hand. I think the other thing folks need to understand is when you talk about a woman's right to choose, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what other rights are at stake should the wrong person become president of the United States and appoint justices to the Supreme Court that are willing to strip away other rights. And that's a real conversation that has to be had. So when we're talking about November's election, we honestly could be talking about what the future of our country looks like with regards to what rights we have and what rights we don't have as citizens in this country. Additionally, I think a lot of people are very, very concerned about their pockets. They're concerned about the cost of food. They're concerned about being able to take care of their families. They're concerned about the wages that they're making and their ability to support themselves. So I think when you're at the dinner table with many Americans, they're also talking about their pockets. And so I think that's on the top of a lot of folks' minds as well. And then I know in my city and across many major cities, issues like crime and what we're doing to address those issues are extremely important. When you have young people across this country losing their lives to gun violence because we cannot control the amount and the proliferation of guns that we see in this nation, I think lots of people are extremely interested in that. I mean, I could go on about what's on the minds. I think of, the guys that I hang out with when I go to the barbershop. But those are just a few.
I think that that's a good place to begin. And I mean, he's now laid out three very, very important issues for us. The abortion issue, the women's rights issue. That's how I'm sure the Democrats are phrasing it. He's right about these guns, because even here in the Capitol, someone was killed in the Capitol, one block from where Representative Jordan has his office, right? And of course the cost of living. Now, it would seem to me, I'm going to let Jeffrey and Rogette chime in here. Two of those Democrats may have a plus. The third, the cost of living, that could be a weakness. Am I right, Jeffrey?
Yes, you're right. And generally, it's been my experience, both personally in elections and from reading history, that pretty much always the number one issue in a presidential election is the state of the economy. If it's going great, that benefits the incumbent president and his party. If it's not going so great, I remember vividly Jimmy Carter losing in 1980 to President Reagan because of the state of the economy. That was the number one issue. So generally, that issue is always there, and for a reason. Most people are not political geeks like we are. They're busy living ordinary, everyday lives, taking care of their families, et cetera, et cetera. They go to the grocery store to buy a dozen eggs, and the price, keeps going up. That hits home, not to mention filling the tank with gas. So, yeah, I think that is always the number one issue.
And yet on the economy thing, I mean, there's a lot of good news in this economy too. It's strange that that isn't being played up more, Rogette. I mean, what's wrong with you Democrats? You're not able to simply get your messaging out there about how good the economy really is.
Well, I think we have to remember that people see life through their own paradigm. And as analysts, we have to remember we can't tell people what to think, how to feel, how they should be based on numbers. I mean, yes, we can say inflation is going down. Yes, we can say gas prices are going down. But as Chairman Harris knows, the Democrats have been trying to raise the minimum wage to meet the rising costs that have happened since COVID occurred. So, that's something that we need to push. When we talk about the economy, when someone says, well, I don't feel it, we have with the student loan situation, with President Biden's SAVE program, yes, some students' loans have been forgiven, but again, when you go looking for these jobs and you see the wages of these jobs, we need to remind voters that as Democrats, we have been fighting hard to raise these wages for you to meet the rising costs of today. So I just want to stress, like anything in life, we have to remember the paradigm of the individual that we are speaking to. And I know last night I put together a workshop on talking to voters, because we've already started our canvassing efforts here in Dauphin County. And members from the Biden-Harris team were the ones that I got to actually conduct the training. And that was a big issue that we spoke about last night. Last week, I got to speak to Governor Shapiro for a Juneteenth event. And I know the issues that Chairman Harris brought up, I spoke to the governor about as well. But again, we have to remember the paradigm of the people that we are speaking to as we reach out to voters.
Well, Chairman Harris, let me pull you back in here yet, since we're now focused on the economy. How do you spin this message in your favor? I mean, prices are going up. People really feel things are high. How do you spin it?
I don't think you have to spin. I think you just got to tell people the truth.
Exactly.
The truth is that politics usually trails what you actually see, and that what a president does, typically you don't see the effects for many of those things for 2-3 years. So a lot of what you're seeing, a lot of the negative that you're seeing, is the ramifications of a failed presidency under our previous President Donald Trump. These things don't just happen overnight. It takes some time to unfold. I mean, the way he botched responding to COVID-19 and how it affected the supply chain and supply and demand amongst people. We're feeling the effects of that now. The tax cuts that were supposed to be for regular people that went to the wealthy. We're seeing the effects of those things now. So I think we have to do a better job of explaining to everyday voters that a lot of what you're feeling today didn't just happen because of a decision that happened yesterday. A lot of these things are happening because of decisions that happened 2 and 3 years ago. In addition to that, you also got to remind people of the numbers. Talk about the Black community. Black unemployment is the lowest that we've seen in a very long time. So you know, those type of facts we have to continue to share with folks. When you talk about financing and building wealth and expanding, I mean, when young people are able to see their student loan debts erased, that is how you build wealth. That helps the economics of folks who have, you know, done what we told them to do, which was go back and get a higher education and, work and build and whatnot. But far too many of our young people have come out with a mountain of debt. The Biden administration has helped forgive that debt for lots of folks. So, we have to do a better job of telling the story and telling the truth about what actually happened. There's no spin necessary when you actually have facts to back it up.
I got it. So you're going to go with the truth. And Jeffrey, I'm going to tell you that I'm talking to a lot of young people these days. We have an internship, high schoolers and college kids. College kids, this debt thing is a big deal for them. If they were voting, that's one of their big issues. So all right. So we've got this issue here with the economy that's going to be top. But let's move into the women's rights thing. And Jeffrey, I mean, he raised a good point that the Democrats are spinning it not just as abortion, but my right to be in control of my own body. Right? I mean, how even Republicans are starting to pull back a little bit on that. Am I right or wrong?
I have never understood why Democrats don't want the American people to decide this issue for themselves. What they did is have a few people in black robes force the decision, which of course became controversial for the entire time of its existence. What President Trump is favoring is if we in the state of Pennsylvania are pro-life or pro-choice, we get to decide. That's the choice, and I don't see what's wrong with that. I think that, and not to mention politically, I think it's helpful when you take the decision out of the hands of people and put it in the hands of judges. That's where you get off track. And frankly, it doesn't matter whether it's abortion or anything else. You've got to have people, the American people, involved in making these kind of decisions. And so now we will be able to make our decision here in Pennsylvania, what kind of abortion policy we want. And that's the way it should be.
But the problem, Jeffrey, and I'm speaking as a woman here, I shouldn't have different rights depending on what state I live in. That's the problem with what you just said.
Well, but with
that
all
should
due
be
respect,
my
Rogette,
choice, my rights.
It's not your business or mine what other states are doing. It's our business what we do in Pennsylvania.
But it's my right as a woman to be able to live in whatever state I want. That shouldn't be a decision. I should be able to get the health care. I should be able to get the health care that I deserve, regardless of what 50 states I live in.
Let's pull in Chairman Harris. What are your thoughts?
All right, Jeffrey. Let's extrapolate upon what you said, that the public should be voting and not judges. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of judges, and every single court case, whether it's a speeding ticket, whether it's a serious crime, whether it's civil, we're going to have the American people go and vote on every single case. Is that what you want to do?
No.
Exactly. So you can't pick and choose when you think a judge is necessary.
Well, I don't understand.
Let me finish. You can't pick and choose when you think a judge is necessary and when a judge isn't necessary. Here's what's interesting to me. Okay. For years, it has been the litmus test of every Republican president to find out where their appointment to the Supreme Court would be on abortion. It has been the litmus test for the Republican Party, for every federal judge. Where are you going to be on abortion. It has been the litmus test. This is not a surprise that you get Donald Trump in office and that he appoints justices that would overturn Roe v. Wade. But now that that has happened, now my Republican friends are saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with this. This is we don't want judges making these decisions." But you were using the judges, you were using this issue as a litmus test to decide what judges you were going to have. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say on one hand, we need the judiciary and all these things and utilize the judiciary to your advantage. And then on the other hand, when people criticize decisions that have been made by your president, by the president who appointed those justices, now all of a sudden you want to remove judges from the equation and say just leave it up to the people to vote.
Representative Harris, I believe very strongly that as an elected legislator, you should be making that decision because the people of your district say that they support whatever. That's your job. And handing it off to some judge is not the way to do it.
I disagree.
Let
me just give me like 30 seconds. I disagree. And here's why I disagree. Because while I am elected representative and I represent my people, I also know that politics and re-election play a very important role in how people decide. And that having justices who do not have to determine or depend on the whim of political partisanship is important to the future of our country. Let me be very clear. If it was up to the ballot box and not the justices, I would have grown up and went to a segregated school. If it was up to the justices, if it was up to the people and not justices, we would not have people who get to determine who they love and have that kind of equality. Many of the civil rights and many of the major decisions of our day, we knew that politics alone could not address it, but that you needed people who were looking at our Constitution and not doing it in a political lens, but doing it based off of what they see our Constitution says is right. That and only that is the reason why we have many of the rights that we have today. And leaving these things up to the political will and the political whims of politics could really devastate the democracy that we have in this country.
So democracy is anti-democracy.
No. Democracy is understanding the flaws in the body politics when you spend millions and billions of dollars to have propaganda and to perpetuate narratives to help sway people. There are decisions where you need people who are not swayed by the political winds, but who are looking at the document, which is our Constitution, which we all are supposed to want to uphold, and make decisions based solely on that document and not the political whims that change.
Representative Harris, the only thing I will say that could be called into question by what you're saying is that, unfortunately, people are seeing a lot of politics in the Supreme Court. They're seeing a lot of ideology, and that so that that's the criticism that many of these people who are appointed, they're appointed with special agendas that are ideological. So you're not escaping, the politics almost.
It's not a perfect system at all. But I would much rather some of the decisions that are being made are made by neutral, or as much as possible, neutral arbiters, right? And not those who have to worry about the next election. If we left justice to the next election, where would we be with our criminal justice system? If everybody had to worry about the next election, right? We have to understand that there are decisions that need to be made with regards to our Constitution that should be above the political winds, which is why, in order to change the Constitution, there is a higher level, there's a higher bar to do so, because even the framers of the Constitution knew that there had to be some things that were bigger than just the political bickering of the
Let me just bring this in with Rogette's point. And Jeffrey, I just want to, and we're going to move on from this because we've got two other things to talk about, but aren't there some things that just should be universal freedoms if you live in the United States of America? I mean, we don't want one state to say, you know, one thing and another state to say another thing, and then we never know as an American where we stand with this freedom and democracy thing. That doesn't cause you any concern, Jeffrey?
No, I mean, the whole premise of the country is we have 50 states, and everybody in that state gets to make their decision on fundamental issues. And if we want to make it a federal issue, a federal law, then we have representatives in Congress who are certainly free to do that. Whatever. My objection is writing things into, you know, whether it's abortion or, to go back long before we were around, the Dred Scott decision, which was an attempt to write slavery into the Constitution. No, I'm sorry, but no.
Thank you for that, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. But let's move on. We've
Can I just say real quick, I just want to humanize it, that this is a healthcare decision for women, and women should be able to make this decision, which is a tough decision, with their doctors. And I just want to kind of end it on that as a woman, I should not have different, have different healthcare options depending on what state I live in.
Rogette,
and a lot of women in this election will see it that way, Jeffrey. And we have seen it with special elections and elections over the years since Dobbs that have favored candidates that want women to be able to make these decisions for themselves.
Well, Rogette, all I can say is we had President Trump appointed a woman to the Supreme Court, and she disagrees with you.
I never said all women think the same. With that said, since that decision, women have come out to vote, and it has favored Democrats. That's just a fact.
And I think
as the representative said, that's just a fact.
This could be a higher issue than even the cost of living. We'll see.
We'll see.
But it could be. Now let's move on, because the gun thing is another one that Representative Harris brought up, and that seems to be important in Pennsylvania. Although we haven't been able to really get any really strong changes in our gun laws. What's that about, Representative Harris? Why can't we? There was some hope with this last week, there was going to be a push to really get something stronger on the books. Not happening. And the crime the shootings keep going up in Harrisburg with 15-year-olds with guns, and the same for Philadelphia. I know this is dear to you. So why can't we make progress on this?
Well, I think people don't value the lives that are being lost. I think the moment that people have to worry about their sons and their daughters being killed, I think they'll care. Black bodies don't warrant the same compassion as others do. And that's just how I see it. When Black and brown folks in my neighborhood are getting killed, you know, the dominant groups don't care about that. But when things come to your doorstep, that's when folks care. Look, I tell people all the time, epidemics don't know borders. They don't know borders. So epidemics of gun violence don't just stay in certain neighborhoods. It begins to become pervasive, and it begins to show its head in other places. So we haven't been able to get stuff like that done because people, in my view, in my opinion, people don't value the lives that they're seeing lost. But when it's their son, when it's their daughter, then people start to change their tune.
Jeffrey, I want to hear what you have to say about that, because I'm even more cynical than, believe it or not, than Representative Harris. I think it's a money issue, even above a race issue. I think people, honestly, you would think this crisis of gun violence with the mass shootings and all would be enough for all of us to come together. And I know you probably don't agree with this, Jeffrey, but it's like there's just so much suffering, but it's not. I mean, I think it's also just connected to who's making the most money off of this, and are they willing to stop making that money to save lives? Jeffrey, am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Well, you're wrong.
Okay, I appreciate that.
What I think, Joyce, is this isn't about guns. It's about behavior. And if we are living in communities where we are raising kids not to respect the law, not to respect each other, the gun is immaterial to the whole thing. You could have the toughest gun laws out there. Bad people will steal guns and commit crimes. That's just a fact.
bad people, it's sick people. I mean, now I mean, Rogette, I'm going to bring you in here. The mental illness crisis that our country is facing, and Pennsylvania, it means that people are not thinking right. You know, a lot of these crimes have been committed by people who have serious problems. Rogette, isn't mental health part of the issue here, and the easy access to guns from people? We can't even get red flag laws done.
I do think that
Rogette,
some people who are committing these crimes have mental illness. But I do want to go back to Representative Harris's point, because I myself have heard people who live in suburbs, who live in rural areas say, oh, those cities, not my, what's that saying? Not my monkey, not my circus, or whatever that cliche is to say, not my problem, basically. I don't live there. That's not my issue. And then, as you see, we have these mass shootings in white schools, in suburban schools, in areas like that. Then all of a sudden it's a huge problem. So I definitely think, again, the paradigm that you're looking through, when does this affect me? You know, we have drugs and overdoses and predominantly Black and brown schools. Well, that's their problem. As we know, these drugs have creeped into the suburbs. Now, you know,
yeah,
there's a lot more attention. But I do also think that there is the lobby. I think the lobby is more on the political side as to why we can't get any type of legislation through to help protect people, because as we know, the gun lobby gives millions of dollars to Republican candidates, and obviously who you take money from will affect your votes. That's just a fact. But I do think there's a racial and regional component to this issue that just shouldn't be ignored.
I'm still not convinced, because white kids have been dying, little babies have been dying in schools. We had the shoot up of the Pittsburgh synagogue, right? It's like, and nothing still moves us.
No, and we changed the law, and we did.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Those things happened. We addressed those things.
Correct.
And here's the thing. Let me be very clear. I'm not necessarily talking about AR-15s. I'm talking about handguns. That's what's coming into my neighborhood and killing people is handguns. And look, last time I checked, they're not making handguns in South Philadelphia. Somehow, some way, they're getting into our neighborhoods and they're getting into the hands of young people who should not have them. Now, we can criticize parents and all of that kind of stuff, and we could talk about the community aspects to it. That is a conversation that we could have as well. But we also have to be mindful that the guns are not being made here, and yet they're making their way here. We have to be mindful that you can buy 20 guns, lose all 20 of those guns, and not be required to report it. If I walk outside right now and my car is not outside, I'm going to call somebody and tell them that my car is not outside. But for some reason, you can lose a deadly weapon, right? And not be forced to report it. And we can't get legislation through the legislature for something as simple as that. I submit to you that a lot of that is because it's knocking on my doorstep and not others. And look, people could disagree. I tell them one thing: prove me wrong. I'd love to see it.
Well, I will just simply say, I don't think with all of this going on, enough has been done to curtail the guns, period, in any form or fashion. And much more needs to be done to try to, especially keep the children safe, right? And I would say this, Jeffrey, PennLive we just had an editorial in which we repeated Commissioner Carter's inquiry or question to the parents: get your children home. Why should a child who's 15 years old be on a downtown street at 3 a.m. in the morning outside of a bar?
Exactly.
Now, let me throw this out to each one of you. Let me just, because this will be a provocative one, and we'll end on. No, we can't end on this because we got to also talk about the Biden push for immigration reform. But if a child kills someone or shoots someone up outside of a bar, should the parents be held responsible, as they were, in the recent case? What was it, in Michigan or whatever? What are your thoughts on that, Representative Harris?
I think there's a lot of circumstances that play into that, and it's not a easy yes or no answer. I think there's some things that we have to take into consideration. You have to take into consideration, was the parent derelict in their responsibility, and that's a different standard than just to say, oh, this young person committed this crime, and we're going to hold their parents responsible. Now, with that being said, I also could say that two things could be true at the same time. That I
Mhm.
don't necessarily think that it's black and white, but I also still think that we do need to have parents need to have conversations with other parents about what they're doing. My mother, when I lived with my mother, that was not my room. That was her room. And at any time that she wanted to go and look in my
Right.
room and check my stuff, she had every right and responsibility to do so because it was her house. When I lived with my mother, I could not come into her house at certain times because it was her house. Now, those are parenting things that I think we need to have serious conversations with. That's not necessarily a political conversation. I think that's more of a pastor or imam or rabbi or somebody. I think those are those kind of conversations. But as far as holding parents responsible, I don't think it's a yes or no answer. I think that there are facts that come into play that you have to see.
Good response. Yeah, Rogette, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's cut and dry if a kid's out there at 3 a.m. in the morning, should the mother or father? That's the other thing. So much falls on mothers, because many of these mothers in Harrisburg are single moms, right? Struggling and trying to keep things together. So, what are your thoughts, Rogette?
I honestly don't have anything to add. I mean, I was raised by a single mother, and I wouldn't dare go out at 3 o'clock in the morning. That just that never would have happened. Yeah, it's definitely a case by case. Parents obviously play a role in that case that you mentioned. As we know, that their son was crying for help. There was
Yeah,
issues
yeah.
with him, some mental illness. There were things that they ignored, which is that case. I don't want to put every case in the same category, but there's definitely a place for parents. Parents are a child's first teacher, obviously, so there's a place for them, but I would never blanket every situation into one.
Jeff, I think we have some common ground on this one. I mean, they're saying there are cases where parents have to step up and do their jobs, but there are other cases where the parent may have done all that they responsibly
Yeah,
could.
I do think we have some common ground on this. It just is inconceivable to me that the case you described of a 15-year-old kid being outside a bar at 3 in the morning. Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
somebody somewhere should be responsible for that kid. And
right.
it would seem to me if as your editorial suggested, if they're not responsible, they should be,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
should be held responsible. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, we talk about all these different issues as if they're affecting everybody over 18, when in fact they affect, kids. And you got kids out there rolling around, whether it's getting guns or having abortions or what have you, in any situation. Their parents should have some degree of control over their situation. And when they get to be 18, God bless them, they're on their own and they can vote.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can delve into this, but I really think there's common ground here, that you got to look at case by case basis. Okay, Representative Harris, one final thing we've got to talk about, because Jeffrey keeps telling us that immigration is an issue. And now it looks like President Biden has thrown down the gauntlet, and he's moved forward with some boldness to provide a pathway to citizenship for some undocumented residents. What are your thoughts on what he's announced today?
Think the president um, made a bold and decisive decision to actually address issues in immigrations when the Congress has not done so and has been stagnant in addressing things. Here's the things that we need to really talk about when we talk about folks who are here. Many of them go to work every day. Many of them pay taxes, and many of them support the economy of Pennsylvania and this nation. And many of them are doing jobs that many of us would not want to do. I remember when I was having conversation with some of my very red Republican friends who were talking about Kennett Square, which is in the southeast part of our state, and is the mushroom capital of the world, right? Well, without our brothers and sisters who are doing that work, we wouldn't have that industry. So I think what the president has done is said, listen, these are people who are working, who are providing, and who are doing for our economy. We should provide them with a pathway to citizenship, and we should not be breaking up families.
Right. Rogette, what are your thoughts on that? Because we'll let Jeffrey chime in because he's got some opposition to the table.
It was long, overdue. The president did what was necessary. These are individuals who are contributing positively to our country, and they deserve that citizenship. And immigration, as we know, is going to be an issue this year moving forward.
And Jeffrey, I think you're going to point out that this is the wrong signal to send at the wrong time, right?
Before I was saying to you just right before we started this, and he's still going. President Trump is in Wisconsin, and he talked about this, and he made it abundantly clear that this was going to be a big issue with him. He's going to talk about it, and the crowd, which is what I found interesting, the crowd spontaneously burst into chants of send them home, send them home, send them home. So that says to me that there are a significant number of people that think, you got to come into this country legally. This is a nation of immigrants, but there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, and the wrong ways are getting preferential treatment. I just think that's the sentiment. But surely it's very clear from what I listened to this afternoon that President Trump is going to make this a big issue.
Okay. Well, I guess it will be one of the many partisan issues that our country is going to have to decide by choosing the next president. Well, we're going to have to stop it here. You guys are incredible. And Representative Harris, I want to thank you again. You make some powerful arguments. You set me straight several times here. So I appreciate that. And I really want to invite you to join us again when your schedule permits. But thank you. Any last words you want to leave us with?
Listen, I think elections are important. I think people need to get out and vote. I tell people all the time, whether you vote or not, you've actually let your voice be heard. And silence is a vote as well. And I don't think people should surrender their vote to silence. Everybody should let their voice be heard and take part in the political process.
And Joyce, if I just may end by asking Representative Harris how long it will take before he is Speaker Harris.
I love what I'm doing as appropriations chair. I love my speaker and Speaker McClinton. We have done our leadership team has done so much work together. We work well together, and we're going to keep pushing for the people of Pennsylvania.
Well, once again, we have been able to find common ground. We all are urging people to vote. And I want to also let our viewers and our listeners know, I'm extending invitation to our Republican legislators as well. They have to accept the handshake to come on. If not, I will keep turning to our Democrats and giving them a platform as well. But we welcome everybody. So with that, I thank Representative Harris. I thank Rogette Harris. And I thank the famous Jeffrey Lord once again. See you guys next week.